I know you don't want to be here, but you don't have a choice. Marry me, or your mother dies. She thought it was a business deal, but what he demanded next would change everything. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any twists. And hey, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments and let's get the conversation started. Emma Monroe thought she was just signing a contract to save her mother's life, but now, locked in a marriage with Daniel Harrington, she's about to learn that there's a price she's not ready to pay. But what Daniel wants from her is not just marriage, it's something much darker. Emma Monroe had never known a life filled with luxury. She had always been content in the small, quiet world of Atlanta, until now. The world she had known was unraveling faster than she could hold it together. Her mother, the only family she had left, was slipping away. The doctors had given their final verdict, but Emma refused to believe it. Not yet. Not when there was so much more to do. Bills, medical expenses, mounting debts. Emma was drowning in them. The weight of it all pressed against her chest and she felt her breath shortening. How could she save her mother with no money, no options? That was the moment everything changed. She had never heard of Daniel Harrington, but somehow he knew her. He had a proposition that would either save her mother's life or destroy everything she knew about herself. "I can save your mother," Daniel said, "but there's a price." Emma stares at him, bewildered, as he slides a contract across the desk to her. He doesn't explain further. She picks it up, glancing over the terms. The words blur in her vision as the weight of the decision crushes her. The contract was simple in form, but Emma knew it would change her life forever. Marry him, that was all it said. A few lines, legal jargon, a few signatures, but Emma knew better than to believe it was that simple. Emma looks up, her eyes searching his face for any sign of a joke. This had to be some kind of twisted joke, right? But Daniel's face is stone cold, unwavering. She asked him why. Why her? He didn't answer directly, just told her that if she signed, her mother's medical bills would be paid, her debts erased, it would all be taken care of, no more worrying, no more struggling. Emma sits back, heart racing. The contract still rests on the desk between them. Her hand trembles as she picks up the pen, glancing at Daniel one last time. But as she reached for the pen, a cold realization washed over her. There was something off. This man wasn't doing this out of kindness, and whatever price he was asking, Emma knew it was far more than she was ready to pay. She signs the contract with trembling fingers. Emma had just signed her life away. She had no idea what she had just agreed to, but as the pen left the paper, she felt the weight of the chain already tightening around her. And as Emma stepped into the world that Daniel had promised her, she had no idea that her real battle, one of love, power, and betrayal, was just beginning. Emma's life was no longer her own. When she left Daniel's office that day, it wasn't just the ink on the contract that weighed her down. It was the overwhelming sense of crossing a threshold into a world she didn't understand, a world where everything she thought she knew no longer applied. Her small apartment, the quiet hum of a life lived on the edge, seemed so far away now. She was heading into a different world entirely, one that promised her safety, but at a cost she wasn't sure she was ready to pay. The building loomed above her, sleek and modern, its glass windows reflecting the golden rays of the afternoon sun. Inside, marble floors, glistening under soft ambient lighting, stretched as far as the eye could see. She had never seen anything like this in her life. Never imagined she would be walking through these halls under the watchful eyes of strangers whose wealth felt suffocating. Emma stands before a set of massive doors, hesitant. They open automatically, revealing a lavish office. Daniel stands by the large window, his back to her, overlooking the city. He doesn't turn as she enters. Daniel Harrington's office wasn't just a place of business, it was a reflection of the man himself. Everything in it was cold, calculated, and precise. There was no warmth, no comfort, just power. And yet, as Emma stepped into this world, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Emma stands still for a moment, scanning the room. She notices the expensive paintings on the walls, the rows of books neatly stacked on the shelves, and the large desk at the center, sitting untouched, like the room itself was frozen in time. Daniel was as cold as the room he inhabited. His movements were deliberate, precise, like a chess player preparing for his next move. He didn't need to say much to make his presence felt. The weight of his silence was enough to make Emma feel small, insignificant. Daniel turns, finally acknowledging Emma with a sharp, calculating gaze. His words are measured, as if he's trying to gauge her every reaction. "You'll be staying here," Daniel said, his voice steady. "This is where you belong now." His words were not an invitation, they were a decree. Emma nodded, feeling the full impact of what she had signed up for, but a part of her still couldn't believe it. Emma stands, her eyes shifting around the office. She takes a step forward, the sounds of her heels clicking sharply against the cold floor. She's uncomfortable, but there's no turning back now. The apartment she'd be staying in was nothing like she had imagined. It wasn't just a place to live, it was a fortress. Every detail of the space spoke to Daniel's control over everything, down to the very air she breathed. The high-end furnishings, the subtle security cameras, the hidden doors behind paintings. This was more than luxury, this was dominance. Emma walks to the window, staring out at the sprawling city below. A storm brews in the distance, dark clouds gathering over the horizon. She can't shake the feeling that it's a storm of her own making. Her world had just shifted, but Emma wasn't sure if it was for the better. She had traded one cage for another, but this one came with a golden lock and a key that she had yet to understand. She was stuck in a gilded cage with Daniel holding the only key. But in the quietest moments, as the storm raged on outside, Emma knew one thing for certain. There was far more at stake here than her mother's life, and whatever game Daniel was playing, she was about to find out that she was more than just a pawn. The days blurred together in Daniel's world. Luxurious dinners, silent exchanges in the grand penthouse, and the ever-present weight of the contract she had signed. Emma had expected a shift, but she wasn't prepared for how cold it would feel. Her mother's condition had improved, thanks to the money that Daniel had promised, but Emma couldn't shake the sense that something wasn't right. She was living in a gilded cage, but even the most beautiful cage felt suffocating when the door was locked from the outside. Emma sits at a sleek, modern dining table, reviewing the contract once again. The paper feels heavier in her hands now. The room is silent except for the sound of her breathing and the rustle of the pages as she skims over the fine print. The terms were clear: a functional marriage, no emotions, no intimacy unless both agree. Public appearances only. All personal interactions are strictly professional. She had signed without reading every line, driven by desperation. But now, as she reread the contract, the words seemed to mock her. What was Daniel truly after? She had thought the contract was just a formality, but now she wasn't so sure. The contract was a cage, and it wasn't just her freedom it was locking up. It was her heart. The one thing she'd had left. Daniel Harrington never said much. His silence was always more telling than words. He wasn't the kind of man who needed to explain himself. Everything was in the rules, and the rules were the only thing that mattered. Emma looks up from the contract, meeting his eyes. A chill runs through her as he approaches. He leans against the counter, his presence filling the space between them. "You know the terms," Daniel said, his voice smooth, devoid of emotion. "No emotions, no intimacy, just business. We're a perfect team." Emma stares at him, her gaze hardening. She can feel the walls closing in, the weight of the contract pressing against her chest. She opens her mouth, but the words die before she can speak them. What did Daniel want from her? Was she really just a means to an end, a pawn in his game of power? Or was there something more, something he wasn't telling her? The silence between them was deafening, and Emma's heart raced with 1,000 questions she couldn't answer. Every gesture, every word was calculated, but Emma couldn't decide if it was calculated to protect her or to control her. She had always thought she was in control of her life. Now, she was just a pawn in someone else's game. Emma stands up, the tension in her body evident. She turns away from Daniel, walking to the window. The city below is alive, but inside, Emma feels like she's suffocating. She couldn't escape, not yet, not while her mother's life hung in the balance. But she couldn't help but wonder, was this marriage truly her only way out? Or had she just traded one kind of prison for another? Emma looks out the window, the darkening sky reflecting the turmoil inside her. A storm is brewing, both outside and in her heart. Emma knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back now. She was trapped, but the question was, who held the keys to her cage? The more Emma tried to push her suspicions aside, the more they clawed at her. Something about Daniel's cold detachment, his perfectly curated world, it didn't add up. There was a puzzle piece missing, and Emma was determined to find it. Days passed in a blur of appearances and formalities, but Emma's mind never stopped searching. Each day she discovered more about Daniel's world, the offices, the power, the endless events. But behind it all, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was nothing more than a tool in a game she didn't understand. In every corner of the apartment, there was a subtle reminder that she was being watched. The hidden cameras, the way the staff acted around her, nothing was truly private. Emma had always believed that secrets were something you kept hidden in the shadows. But here, in Daniel's world, secrets were out in the open, in plain sight. Yet so well hidden in plain sight that no one questioned them. Emma's gaze shifts as she walks into a room where Daniel stands, talking quietly to one of his colleagues. His back is turned to her, but Emma can feel the tension in the air. The conversation ends, and Daniel turns, offering her a tight smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Daniel Harrington had always been a man of control, his emotions, his actions, his life. But Emma had learned that even the most controlled man had secrets. The question was, what was he hiding, and why did she feel so compelled to find out? As Daniel walks away, Emma moves to his desk, her fingers gently tracing over a stack of papers. Her eyes narrow as she spots something out of place, a file, slightly ajar. Her curiosity flares, and for a moment, she's tempted to open it. But something stops her. A cold shiver runs down her spine, and she pulls her hand back quickly, afraid of what she might find. Emma knew she was treading dangerous waters, but she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Daniel was hiding, whatever secret was buried beneath his polished exterior, it was the key to everything. It wasn't just about her marriage anymore. It was about discovering who Daniel really was, and no matter what it cost, Emma was willing to find out. She sneaks in, her heart pounding in her chest, every step deliberate and cautious. She approaches his desk, the soft hum of the city's lights outside adding to the tension. With trembling hands, she opens the drawer, pulling out the file she had seen earlier. It's a thick folder with a name she doesn't recognize, her own name, typed in bold letters on the front. It was then that Emma understood the truth she had been running from. Her name, on the folder. She wasn't just a wife. She wasn't even just a pawn. She was something else entirely. She was tied to Daniel's world in a way she hadn't yet understood. Emma's face hardens as she flips through the pages, her eyes scanning the documents with growing shock and disbelief. The secrets she uncovers are more than she bargained for. Documents detailing her family's history, her financial situation, and her ties to Daniel's past. The final page contains a chilling note. The marriage will secure everything. No one leaves. What she had found wasn't just a contract, it was a chain that bound her to Daniel, to his empire, to a destiny she hadn't chosen. And the deeper she looked, the more she realized she was part of a plan she hadn't signed up for. Emma's hands shake as she sets the file down. She stares at the contents for a moment, her breath shallow, her mind racing. For the first time since signing the contract, she feels truly trapped. The walls are closing in. There was no escaping now. The web had already been spun, and Emma was caught in it. But what Daniel had planned for her, what he truly wanted, she still didn't know. And as the night grew darker, Emma knew one thing for certain: the truth would come at a price. Emma had never felt so alone, surrounded by people but isolated in her own world. Her days were a blur of public appearances, formal smiles, and rehearsed conversations, but inside she was slowly crumbling. Sarah could see it in Emma's eyes. The exhaustion, the worry, the fear, it was all so clear. But what could she say? How could she help her friend when the walls surrounding her were built by someone far more powerful? Emma looks up at Sarah, forcing a smile, but the weight of the secret she's keeping is too much to bear. She tries to speak, but the words catch in her throat. She thought she could trust him. She had to, right? He was the one who saved her mother, after all. But something inside her twisted with doubt every time he looked at her with that cold, calculating gaze, and now every moment felt like a trap she couldn't escape from. Daniel's eyes narrow as he sees the folder in her hands. He knows what she's found, but doesn't yet know how much Emma understands. His mask of control slips for just a second, and Emma feels a rush of adrenaline. She's getting closer to the truth, closer than she's ever been before. Emma opens her mouth to speak, but Daniel cuts her off, his voice firm and calculated. "You shouldn't have looked, Emma," Daniel says, his voice like ice. "I told you not to dig." Emma's breath catches in her throat. The warning in his voice sends a chill down her spine, but she stands her ground. "I had to know," she replies, her voice trembling but strong. "What is this? Why is my name in this file? Why are you doing this to me? Why me?" Daniel stands up slowly, walking around his desk, his every step calculated. The silence between them is thick, charged with unspoken truths. For a moment, Emma thought he might confess, but instead he merely smiles, a cold, rehearsed smile. "You think you understand, Emma, but you don't. This was never about you. This is bigger than both of us." Emma's heart races as she realizes that whatever Daniel is involved in, it's far more dangerous and complex than she ever imagined. She opens her mouth to argue, but Daniel steps closer, his presence overwhelming. Daniel's next words hit Emma like a slap. "Your family's debts, my family's business, it's all connected. You signed the contract, Emma. You're part of this now. There's no getting out." The weight of his words sinks in, and for the first time, Emma feels truly trapped. She takes a step back, her mind racing with the realization that she's caught in a web of power, control, and manipulation that goes beyond her understanding. The betrayal wasn't just in the contract, it was in the lies that had been carefully woven around her life, and now those lies were closing in on her. Daniel walks back to his desk, his back turned to her. Emma stands motionless, her mind struggling to process everything. The truth is out, but it only raises more questions. What is Daniel really after? And what does her family have to do with all of this? Emma knew that this wasn't just about a marriage contract anymore. This was about power, power that she couldn't escape. And Daniel was not the man he had pretended to be, not by a long shot. As Emma turns to leave, the camera lingers on her face, confusion, fear, but also something else, determination. The betrayal stung, but it had also sparked something inside her. She was no longer just a victim in this story. She would find a way to take control. Emma Monroe had been betrayed, but she was done being a pawn. It was time to turn the tables. But first, she had to discover what Daniel was truly hiding, and why her name had been tied to him in the first place. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside Emma's heart. She had just uncovered the first layer of Daniel's deception, but something told her the worst was yet to come. She was still trapped, and the walls around her were closing in fast. Emma stands by the window, staring out at the dark skyline of the city, the rain splattering against the glass like tears. The flickering city lights below seemed so distant, as if part of another world. She had thought she was in control, that she could navigate her way through this labyrinth of lies. But the more she uncovered, the more she realized how little she understood. Daniel's world was a web, and no matter how hard she tried to untangle herself, the threads kept pulling her deeper into the mess he'd created. Emma slowly turns away from the window, a look of resolve hardening her face. She picks up her phone, hesitating for a moment before dialing a number. Her heart races as she waits for the line to connect. This wasn't just about saving her mother anymore. It was about survival, about figuring out what Daniel wanted from her and what lengths he would go to get it. And she had a feeling that if she didn't find the answer soon, she might lose more than just her freedom. Emma wasn't alone in this fight. She had allies, people who were watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. But the storm wasn't just outside. It was brewing within her too. And no matter how hard she tried to keep her emotions in check, the walls were beginning to crack. Daniel had always been a man of control, but even the strongest men have cracks in their armor. And Emma had just discovered one of his. The question was, what would she do with it? There was no going back now. Emma had made up her mind. She would find the answers, no matter the cost. The storm outside would pass, but the storm inside her would burn until everything was laid bare. The storm still rages outside, but now Emma feels like she's facing a different kind of storm, a personal one she can't outrun. Days had passed, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking in circles, circles that had no end. She'd uncovered bits and pieces of Daniel's world, but each revelation only led to more questions, more confusion. What did he want from her? What was he truly asking for? Emma picks up the marriage contract again, reading over the terms she had so blindly signed. The words seemed to mock her now, each one a reminder of her naivety. She had thought she understood it all, the contract, the marriage, the boundaries, but now she knew it was something far more insidious, and Daniel was at the center of it. She had thought her situation was complicated before. Now it felt like she was drowning in it. There was no more dancing around the truth, no more pretending that everything was fine. Emma had to know what Daniel wanted. She had to know what kind of man he truly was, and most importantly, what kind of man he wanted her to be. Emma places the contract down on his desk, the papers crisp, the weight of their significance evident. Daniel looks up at her, his expression unreadable. He doesn't move to touch the contract, just watches her with a cold gaze, as if waiting for her to speak first. "What is this really about, Daniel?" Emma finally asks, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within her. "Why me? Why this marriage? What do you really want from me?" Daniel leans back in his chair, his fingers steepling in front of him. He doesn't answer immediately, as if weighing his words. The pause feels endless, stretching between them like an unspoken threat. "You don't understand, Emma," Daniel says, his voice low and even. "This wasn't about me wanting you. It was about securing control. Your family's debts, my family's power. They're all tied together. You were just the key." The words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. She stares at him, trying to comprehend what he's saying. Her hands tremble slightly as she clenches them into fists, but she forces herself to stay calm. What Daniel said next was more than she could bear. The marriage was never about love. It was never about her. It was about power, control, and the manipulation of everything she thought she knew. Daniel's eyes flicker for a moment, a brief glimpse of something else behind his usual cold exterior. Guilt, perhaps? Regret? But it's gone before Emma can even focus on it. He continues, his voice colder than ever. You were always going to be a part of this, Emma. I knew that the moment I met you." His words drip with finality, as if they were preordained. "But I never expected you to get in the way." Emma's stomach churns. She had always felt something was off, but this was more than she could have ever imagined. There it was, the betrayal. The moment she realized she was nothing more than a pawn in a game much bigger than her. She takes a step back, her mind racing. She had signed the contract, yes, but this was more than she bargained for. Her heart pounds in her chest as she tries to process the magnitude of what Daniel is telling her. Her family's debts, Daniel's business empire, his controlling family, they were all tied together in a web of power she couldn't escape, and she was the centerpiece of it all, whether she wanted to be or not. Emma Monroe was no longer just a pawn. She was a woman determined to take control of her own fate. But first, she had to face the truth about Daniel, about the family he was connected to, and the dark web she had become entangled in. Emma walks to the door, pausing for a moment as she looks back at Daniel. Her eyes are no longer filled with fear, they're filled with resolve. She's done being passive. She's done being manipulated. The storm outside may have raged against the city, but Emma was done running from it. She was going to face it head-on, no matter the cost. Emma had made up her mind. She would no longer be a passive participant in her life. She would uncover every secret Daniel was hiding, and she would break free from the invisible chains he had placed on her. But despite her resolve, there was something she couldn't ignore. It was impossible not to feel drawn to Daniel, no matter how hard she tried to resist. The more she learned about him, the more she realized how little she understood. The man who had forced her into this marriage wasn't just cold and calculating, he was also conflicted. And, in moments when his guard slipped, Emma saw glimpses of something softer, something real. The subtle glances, the way his gaze lingered a little too long, Emma couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. She hated that she felt it, but the attraction was undeniable. Despite everything, despite the contract, despite the power struggles, there was something magnetic between them. Emma shifts uncomfortably in her seat, trying to hide her discomfort. She knows what this attraction means, what it could lead to. But every time Daniel's eyes lock with hers, she feels her resolve slip just a little bit more. The battle inside Emma was becoming more complicated. She was torn between her growing attraction to Daniel and the fierce determination to stay in control of her life. She couldn't let herself fall for him, not again, not after everything he had done. "Are you avoiding me, Emma?" Daniel's voice is calm, but the undertone is unmistakable. He steps closer and Emma feels her heart skip a beat. She knows she shouldn't let him in, but something inside her makes it difficult to push him away. Emma opens her mouth to respond, but the words get stuck. Instead, she turns to leave, walking quickly down the hallway. Daniel watches her go, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if studying her every move. But Emma couldn't outrun the truth. She was drawn to him. She hated that she was, but she couldn't ignore it. In his presence, she felt both empowered and powerless at once. There was a fire in him, one that matched her own, and that fire was dangerous. Later that night, Emma lies awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The weight of the contract, of the marriage, of everything Daniel has demanded presses heavily on her chest. Yet she can't escape the thought of him, his presence, his power, the allure that makes her feel both repelled and captivated. The attraction was becoming impossible to ignore. It had started as a spark, a flicker of curiosity, but now it was a flame, burning inside her. She knew it was dangerous. She knew she was playing with fire. But in that fire she found something else, something she couldn't name, and it terrified her. Emma had tried to focus on the simple things. She had tried to drown out the growing conflict inside her, the feelings she didn't want to acknowledge, but the world wasn't letting her. The more she learned about Daniel's empire, the more dangerous it seemed. His name was Evan. He wasn't just another one of Daniel's colleagues. He was a competitor. And he had been watching Emma for a long time. He had a plan, and that plan didn't involve Emma living happily ever after with Daniel. Evan steps forward, his steps deliberate as he approaches Emma, a slow smile curling on his lips. Emma's eyes narrow, and she feels a sudden chill crawl down her spine. The moment Evan laid eyes on her, he knew what she was to Daniel, an asset, a pawn in a game of power. But Evan had other ideas. He didn't like how Daniel was playing the game. And Emma? She was just another piece to be moved. Evan greets Emma with an ice-cold handshake. There's an unsettling calm in his voice as he introduces himself. "I've heard a lot about you, Emma," Evan said, his tone laced with something darker. "It must be hard being married to someone like Daniel, a man who's always so distant." Emma's stomach churns at his words, the implications behind them weighing heavy on her shoulders. She forces a smile, but it doesn't reach her eyes. She can feel Evan's scrutiny, like a predator eyeing its prey. Evan wasn't just some businessman. He was someone with power, someone with connections that could bring everything Daniel had built crashing down. And Emma? She was right in the middle of it. She wasn't just in danger from Daniel. Now she was at the mercy of people like Evan, who saw her as a threat to be neutralized. As the conversation continues, Evan makes a veiled comment about Daniel's business dealings, something Emma can't ignore. She doesn't understand everything he says, but one thing is clear. He wants her to doubt Daniel, to see him as the enemy. "You must wonder why Daniel asked for your help," Evan says, his voice low, as if sharing a secret. "You're more than just a pretty face in this marriage. You're the key to something much bigger." Emma stands frozen, her heart pounding. She's heard whispers of Daniel's business dealings, but now the truth feels much darker. She knows something's wrong, but Evan's words only add to the confusion. What is Daniel hiding? Evan's words haunted Emma long after the conversation ended. She didn't know how much she could trust him. She didn't even know if she should trust Daniel. But what she did know was that the stakes had just been raised. She wasn't just caught between Daniel and his cold empire anymore. Now there were other forces at play, and they were closing in on her. Later that evening, Emma returns to the penthouse. The lights are dim, casting long shadows in the expansive living room. She feels the weight of the conversation with Evan, the unsettling thoughts spinning in her mind. Her phone buzzes, breaking her thoughts. It's a message from an unknown number. "You don't know what you're getting into. Stay away from Daniel or you'll regret it." Emma's breath catches in her throat. The message is clear. Someone is threatening her, someone who knows exactly what she's involved in. She's not just trapped in a marriage anymore. She's a target. Emma knew she couldn't trust anyone now, not even Daniel. But the question was, who was she supposed to trust? And what did Evan really want from her? What was his game? The game had changed, and Emma was ready to fight back. But the question was, who would she be fighting for? Daniel or herself? The late evening sun casts long shadows through the tall windows, and the weight of the day presses down on her. She has just come from a meeting with one of Daniel's associates, and her mind is racing with the new information she's uncovered. Every day, the walls around Emma felt like they were closing in a little more. The secrets were piling up, and the deeper she dug, the more dangerous things became. But tonight was different. Tonight, something snapped. She couldn't ignore it anymore. The threats, the lies, the constant manipulation, it was all spiraling out of control. And in the silence of the penthouse, Emma realized something crucial. She couldn't trust anyone, not Daniel, not Evan, not even herself. She had thought the contract was her escape. She had thought it was a way to fix everything. But now she saw it for what it truly was, a prison. The pressure was building. Every choice she made was a gamble, every move a risk. And as the storm inside her grew louder, Emma knew she couldn't wait any longer. She needed answers. She needed to confront Daniel, and she needed to do it now. Emma walks over to the door, her heart racing. The camera follows her every move, showing the sharp tension in her movements as she reaches for the door handle. She pauses, looking back at the penthouse, at the life she's been forced into. She's about to leave, but she hesitates, as though something is pulling her back. But what was she walking into? Was Daniel the man she thought he was? Or had she been a fool to believe in him? The contract wasn't just a piece of paper, it was the beginning of something much darker, and Emma had to decide if she was ready to face the truth, no matter the cost. Daniel knew this moment was inevitable. Emma had grown restless. She was no longer just a pawn, she was a player in this game. And now, the stakes were higher than ever. But what Emma didn't know was that the game had already shifted. And this time, there would be no turning back. As Emma ascended, the weight of her decision pressed down on her. She had to confront him. She had to demand the truth. But the closer she got to Daniel, the more she realized that this wasn't just about her marriage, this was about survival. And the moment she walked into that office, nothing would be the same. The elevator dings softly as it reaches the top floor. The doors open, and Emma steps out, her footsteps echoing in the stillness of the hall. The camera lingers on her face, her eyes hard with determination. She walks toward Daniel's office door, her hand reaching for the handle. This was it, the breaking point, the moment when Emma would demand answers, when everything would change. But what she didn't know was that Daniel wasn't the only one with secrets, and in the next few moments, everything she thought she knew would come crashing down. Emma knocks on the door. There's a brief pause, and then Daniel's voice calls from inside. "Come in, Emma. We need to talk." Her hand hovers over the doorknob for a moment, the weight of the decision hanging heavy on her shoulders. The soft hum of the city below drifts through the walls, but in this moment, Emma feels completely isolated. Emma had reached the point of no return. She had come to confront Daniel, to demand the truth about the marriage, the contract, and the darkness lurking behind it all. But what she didn't expect was that the truth, when it came, would come with a price. Daniel doesn't turn to face her right away. His silence is deafening, as though he's waiting for her to make the first move. He knows what's coming, but even he doesn't know how it will unfold. He's as much a prisoner in this game as she is. Emma steps forward, gathering her courage. Her voice is steady, but there's an edge of raw emotion beneath her words. "Why did you do this to me, Daniel?" Emma's voice cuts through the silence, a mixture of hurt, anger, and confusion. "Why did you choose me? Why this contract, this marriage? What do you really want from me?" Daniel turns slowly, his cold gaze locking with hers. His expression is unreadable, but there's something darker in his eyes, a flicker of regret maybe, or something even more sinister. He steps toward her, closing the space between them, his presence overwhelming. "You really want to know, Emma?" Daniel says quietly, his voice laced with an emotion Emma can't quite place. "You think you're here because of some grand love story? No. You're here because you were never meant to be anything more than a pawn. Your family's debts, my family's empire, this was the price you were born to pay." The words hang in the air like a heavy fog. Emma's breath catches in her throat, the reality of the situation crashing down on her. She stares at Daniel, her mind reeling as the pieces start to fall into place. She had always suspected something darker was at play, but hearing it from his mouth sends a shockwave through her system. Emma had thought she was in control. She had thought she could fight her way out of this marriage, out of this contract, but now she realized how deeply she was entangled in Daniel's world. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about saving her mother. It was about power, legacy, and manipulation, forces much greater than she could have ever imagined. Emma stands motionless, her eyes burning with a mix of rage and disbelief. She had trusted him. She had believed that she was doing the right thing, signing the contract, entering this marriage to save her mother. But now it was clear. She had been nothing more than a pawn in Daniel's game, and that was a truth she wasn't ready to accept. The contract she had signed was a death sentence to her own freedom. She had traded her future for the illusion of safety. Daniel had used her, manipulated her into believing she had a choice, when in reality she never had any, and now she had to face the consequences. "You have a choice, Emma," Daniel says, his voice low, his tone almost regretful. "You can leave, walk away from this, but know this. Your mother will never survive without the money. I've already arranged for her treatment, but if you walk away, there's no going back." Emma's mind races. She could walk away, take control of her life, but the price is steep. Her mother's life, the one thing that still keeps her grounded. The weight of the decision is unbearable. Emma had always known there were consequences to her decisions, but now, as she stood before Daniel, those consequences seemed unbearable. She had been forced into this life, into this marriage, but could she really walk away? Could she sacrifice everything for the sake of her own freedom? The silence between them is thick, as Emma takes a step back, her mind spinning. She doesn't speak. Her thoughts are too clouded by the magnitude of what Daniel has just revealed. Her gaze flickers to the window, to the darkened sky outside. The truth was clear now. Emma's freedom wasn't just tied to Daniel, it was tied to something bigger. The question was, what was she willing to sacrifice to get it? With a final glance at Daniel, Emma turns and walks toward the door. She knows that whatever decision she makes now will define the rest of her life. But as she opens the door, she feels a shift, a sense that the battle is just beginning, and the stakes have never been higher. The truth, when it came, was never the way she had imagined it. Emma had spent weeks trying to piece together the fragments of her life, the scattered pieces of a puzzle that she couldn't quite solve, but now she had a clearer picture of the man she was married to and the life she had been dragged into. The contract, the debts, the empire Daniel had built, piece by piece. It was all connected. The more Emma uncovered, the more she realized how deep she had been sucked into a world that was beyond her comprehension, a world where power, manipulation, and control ruled every decision. Daniel had always played his role perfectly, the powerful, enigmatic lawyer. But Emma had seen a crack in the facade, just a brief moment where the weight of the life he was building, and the secrets it came with, seemed to weigh too heavily on him. Emma had realized something. Daniel wasn't just using her, he was trapped too. Emma takes a deep breath, her eyes focused on the city skyline outside. The revelation has shaken her, but she knows it's only the beginning. She grabs her phone and dials an unfamiliar number, her fingers trembling slightly as she waits for the call to connect. There was no more running. Emma had spent too much time asking questions without answers, and now she was ready to get those answers, no matter what the cost. She had a plan, and for the first time she wasn't just trying to survive, she was trying to take control. Evan wasn't a man who dealt in half measures. He wasn't here for small talk. He was here for power, for leverage. But Emma wasn't the naive woman she had been just weeks ago. She was someone else now, a woman who had learned to play the game. Emma's gaze locks with Evan's, and for a brief moment the tension between them is palpable. He leans in, his voice low as he speaks. "I know why you're here, Emma," Evan says, his voice a quiet threat. "But you don't know who you're dealing with. Daniel is only one part of a much bigger picture." Emma listens, her expression unchanged. She's no longer afraid of Evan. She knows he's a player in this game, just like Daniel, but now she's playing too. Her voice is steady, her eyes cold as she responds. "I'm not here to play games anymore," Emma says, her voice clear and unwavering. "I'm here to take control, and I'm going to find out what's really going on, no matter what you or Daniel try to hide." Evan smiles, a slow, dangerous grin that doesn't reach his eyes. He knows Emma isn't the same woman she was when they first met. Evan may have thought he was the one holding the cards, but Emma had just shown him that she had the power to play the game too. The truth was closer than she had ever been, and Emma knew that once she had it, Nothing would ever be the same again. Emma had been preparing for this day for weeks. The moments leading up to this confrontation felt like an eternity. Every piece of information, every conversation, every threat, it had all led to this point. The question was, could she face Daniel and survive the truth? Emma's hand hovers over the door handle, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. She takes a deep breath, her mind focused on one thing. The answers she's been chasing. She wasn't just walking into Daniel's penthouse. She was walking into a storm, one that she had no idea how to survive. But Emma had no choice. She had come too far, learned too much to turn back now. The silence between them stretches, thick with unspoken truths. Emma's steps are slow, deliberate. She feels the eyes of the world on her, even though it's just Daniel, just the two of them. And yet, the power in this room is undeniable. Emma speaks first, her voice cold but steady, no longer a victim. "I'm done with the games, Daniel," she says, her voice cutting through the silence. "Tell me the truth. Everything. Now." Daniel turns slowly, his cold eyes locking with hers. The man she had once hoped to understand was standing before her, and now she was closer than ever to seeing the man behind the mask. But Emma knew she wasn't just here for answers, she was here for her freedom. Daniel crosses the room, his movements calculated, deliberate. His voice is calm, but there's an edge to it. He knows Emma has crossed a line, and so is he. "You really think you're in control, don't you?" Daniel's voice is smooth, as if testing her. "But the truth is, Emma, you were never meant to have control. You were never meant to have a choice. Not really." Emma clenches her fists at her sides, the weight of his words crashing down on her. But something has shifted in her. She's no longer the naive woman who signed the contract out of desperation. She's someone else now. Someone stronger. She had expected this. Expected him to try to manipulate her, to push her back into the role he had cast her in. But Emma wasn't going to play by his rules anymore. She had learned too much, fought too hard, to let him control her any longer. Emma steps forward, meeting Daniel's gaze with unwavering confidence. Her voice is clear, full of determination. "You think you've won, Daniel, but you're wrong. I'm done being your pawn. I'm taking control of my life. Whatever game you're playing, I'm out." Daniel's expression darkens, his facade cracking for the first time. He steps toward her, his voice quieter, more dangerous now. "You think you can just walk away from this? You think this was ever just about you? This is bigger than you, Emma. You'll never be free of this. Never." Daniel's words linger in the air like a warning, but Emma doesn't flinch. She can feel the pressure mounting, but it only fuels her resolve. She had already made up her mind. She was no longer afraid. Emma stood tall, the power she had been seeking now within her reach. She wasn't going to let Daniel dictate her future. The truth, the lies, and the consequences, they were all coming to light. And in the end, Emma would have the final word. But this wasn't over. Not yet. The game was far from finished, and while Emma had taken her first step toward freedom, she knew there would be consequences. Daniel wasn't going to let her go without a fight, but Emma was ready. She was prepared to face whatever came next. Emma had finally reached the tipping point. Everything had led to this moment. The confrontations, the lies, the power struggles. But as the morning sun crept through the glass, Emma realized something crucial. She had a choice now. A real choice. Freedom or love. Which would she choose? Freedom meant leaving it all behind, leaving Daniel, leaving the life she had been thrust into. It meant walking away from the security, the luxury, the promise of safety for her mother. It meant stepping into the unknown, a life with nothing but the hope that she could rebuild. But love was an entirely different kind of cost. She had been forced into this marriage, this life by circumstances she could not control. But now Emma had control. She had the power to make her own choices. to dictate the direction of her life. And yet, the one thing she couldn't control was her heart. Her love for Daniel, despite everything, was still there. The attraction, the pull between them, it hadn't gone away. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore, Daniel," Emma says, her voice quiet but strong. "I don't know if I can keep living like this, but I also don't know if I can walk away from you. From everything we've built, what if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life?" Daniel watches her, his expression unreadable. He's never looked this vulnerable before. His usual cold exterior has cracked, and for the first time, Emma sees the man behind the power, behind the control. She sees his desperation, his own internal battle. Daniel had always been a man of power, of control. But in that moment, Emma realized that he was just as trapped as she was. The love they shared, the connection that had always been there, was now something neither of them knew how to navigate. Love, after all, was never a simple thing. Emma had finally realized that love alone wasn't enough. Love wasn't a cure for the manipulation, the lies, the power games. She couldn't keep sacrificing herself for someone else's idea of happiness. Her happiness, her freedom, was something only she could define. She stands up, her decision made. She walks toward the door, her steps sure and unwavering. Daniel doesn't stop her, though his eyes follow her every movement. The finality in her actions speaks volumes. She turns to face him one last time before leaving the room. "I'm walking away, Daniel," Emma says, her voice filled with finality. "I don't know what the future holds, but I can't keep living in this cage." For a brief moment, Daniel looks as though he's about to say something, to stop her. But then, he just stands there, watching her. The silence between them speaks louder than any words could ever say. Emma knows it's over. She knows she's leaving behind a life that once seemed like salvation. But she's ready for the unknown. Emma Monroe had made her choice. Freedom was not just about walking away from Daniel, from the empire, from the lies. It was about finding herself again, reclaiming the parts of her that had been stolen by fear and manipulation. She had chosen herself. But freedom came with a cost. Emma knew that. And as the elevator doors closed, she couldn't help but wonder what the future held for her now. Could she truly leave Daniel behind? Could she ever escape the life he had built for her? Or would she be forever haunted by the choices they made together?